Here we go. So now we're recording. If you haven't met me before, I'm Ryan Walsh. I'm with the James River Association. I'm the Lower James Restoration Coordinator based out of our Williamsburg office. And I was just going to go ahead and I don't have any slides or anything. I'm just going to chat really quickly about our brand new Living Shoreline Cost Share program. So it's funded with the Virginia Environmental Endowment. We were awarded this grant along with the Elizabeth River Project and DCRCs. We also do some work with the Colonial Soil and Water Conservation District. So this is a cost share program for homeowners throughout the entire Lower James River watershed. And that is from Prince George and Charles City County in the west, all the way down to the mouth of the river, which is at between Fort Monroe and Willoughby Spit in Norfolk. So this is a 50-50 cost share program. So we've been conducting site visits. JRA has specifically with Aaron, with DCRCs, as well as ERPs joined us for a couple of these. But we provide the design as well as the permitting process, all for free. And then from there, it's a 50-50 cost share program. So JRA will fund half of the project and the homeowner will fund half of the project. And that's up to $50,000 per homeowner. So right now, I'm just learning our brand new GIS tools, and I'm going to start generating these concepts for the homeowners really soon. We basically have enough projects that we are interested in for the first year of this grant, and we're hoping to continue this again next year. And when I say we're hoping to continue it next year, we are continuing it next year. So we're looking for more projects to keep this going again. So
Ryan, sorry, I had a question.
Yeah, go for it.
What's the maintenance requirement for your program?
We will, thank you for the reminder. We will cover the maintenance for these projects for the first 3 years. So if a core log blows out, or if oyster castles get dislodged, or if it needs replanting, we will cover that. And this is in exchange for the project staying in place for 10 years. And by staying in place, we mean that we just ask, basically don't rip out the shoreline and put in a bulkhead or a revetment.
And when they sign the agreement with you, how long do they have to maintain it total?
It's 10 years. But the first 3 years we provide all the maintenance and everything. And hopefully by after 3 years, the project is, the grasses are established to the point where you hopefully wouldn't lose sand from a normal average storm. Again, if Category 3 or 4 hurricane rolls through, everybody's probably going to be dealing with some sediment loss at that point. But
I got a question. One site visit. Sorry, go ahead, Chief.
I'm sorry, you go ahead. I was just saying I came in a little late because they were trying to transfer me over. But that Windsor Castle project. Now, what is the name of your organization? Ryan, you are JRA, and you all are sponsoring this?
With the James River Association. So that specific project at Windsor Castle Park, that's one of our demonstration Living Shorelines projects that's funded by a grant from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation.
Okay, and so if you're looking at additional projects and we may be interested further down on Route 10, just, and we're only like 7 miles away from that.
Sure.
Just want to know what we would need to do. And, like I said, we're starting in March to be able to implement something or to start the planning and design. So I would be interested.
Sure. You can reach out to me. I think I've actually contacted you before. I'll direct message you my email so you can reach out to me from there.
Okay.
Ryan, this is Angela. I have a question about the permitting process. When we met, I guess it was year before last now, and I can't even remember. When we met, talking about the Appomattox project, we had some discussion about the permitting process being I don't know what word we use. I don't know if we use expedited. I don't know if we use relaxed, but the permitting processes that we would need to adhere to as far as Army Corps and DEQ and that type thing. So where does that stand now?
So, for the Appomattox demonstration project, that didn't receive any special treatment or anything. I don't really know what their process is on expediting permits. I will say that due to COVID, the Army Corps of Engineers, it's slowed down substantially receiving permits. Yeah. So beyond that, I mean, we were fortunate to receive these permits, most of them before COVID.
Right.
So that's going to be a challenge that we're going to probably meet, I would say, this spring, is becoming intimately aware of how the permitting process is affected as COVID continues. Hopefully, as vaccines become more widely available, their capacity will increase. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. My experiences with Army Corps, through the pandemic has been they have pretty much done their reviews and everything with their mapping systems. I don't know that they've even come out here since the pandemic, but it has not been too much of a challenge for me. Most of the things that I'm looking at are residential projects.
Sure.
So, of course, they're a little bit easier. We looked at some stream crossings and that kind of thing. And they actually did do all of that through the mapping system. They did everything online, and of course, through emails and everything. So hopefully, yeah, like you said, hopefully it will get better.
Yeah. So that's all I have for our new cost share program. Who wants to go next? Either Robyn or Aaron?
Can I ask a question before
Sure.
we leave that? Hi, Casey Filipino with the Hammerheads Planning District. I'm wondering, and maybe Robyn's going to touch on this, but how does the cost share program overlap with VCAP? Because VCAP's eligible only in those localities that are in water conservation districts. So I'm wondering if you're attempting or trying to attempt localities that don't have that option.
Oh, we absolutely are. Yeah, we absolutely are doing site visits, and we're very interested in localities like Newport News and Hampton and places without a soil and water district. It all depends on VCAP's like funding availability. If VCAP is able to fund a project, I mean, that's great. But if they run out of funds, because that pot of money goes to the places statewide, you can certainly jump in with our cost share program.
So there's not really an overlap, though. You're not offering both VCAP funding and VEE.
For the same project, I don't believe so. No.
Okay, and I mean, there's quite a bit of money added to the budget this year for VCAP, so I hope, Robyn,
good.
Comes your way. I forget what the last number I saw was. But anyway, thanks.
Ryan, before we go, this is Jim Lang. I'm an attorney with Pender and Coward Law Firm in Virginia Beach.
Sure.
Are there any programs comparable to yours that apply in the Lynnhaven River and the Elizabeth River?
So the Elizabeth River, that would be the Elizabeth River Project. There's a little sliver of that watershed in Virginia Beach. And our cost share program, again, ERP was awarded this grant with us. That cost share program could fund a living shoreline in that section of the Elizabeth River. For the Lynnhaven River, that's outside of the James River watershed, so I'm a little more unfamiliar with that. But I believe it would still be covered by the Virginia DARE Soil and Water Conservation District. So any living shorelines in the Lynnhaven River, those would be VCAP eligible, I would imagine.
Okay, thank you.
I think Lynnhaven got put back into the James, legislatively speaking, last year. So technically they should be eligible, but also VCAP.
Which is a good segue, Robyn.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe I'll go ahead and jump in then. for anyone who I haven't gotten to meet yet, my name is Robyn Woolsey, and I work for the Colonial Soil and Water Conservation District. We are based in Williamsburg, Virginia, but we also serve Charles City County, New Kent County, James City County, York County, and the city of Williamsburg. So I manage the Virginia Conservation Assistance Program, or VCAP for short, for the Colonial District. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. I also have one other program that we're getting ready to launch that I just wanted to briefly mention. So VCAP is a statewide program. It is managed by the Virginia Association of Soil and Water Conservation Districts, but it is administered locally by individual soil and water conservation districts. So because of that local administration, each soil and water conservation district has the ability to manage the program however they see fit, or however best works in their own office structure. So most of what I'm going to tell you about today is a statewide parameter or a characteristic, but just keep in mind that if you want to pursue an application, it's important to know which district you live in, and so you'll be able to contact them and make sure that you have the correct program parameters in mind. I was trying to see if we had an individual chat for our breakout room. It doesn't look like it, but I might just go ahead and put.
We do.
Oh,
Anything that you chat in here only stays in here. It says, when it says everyone, it just means everybody within the breakout room. We tested this the other day.
Oh, perfect. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to put a link in the chat box that shows you a map of conservation districts across the state so that you can figure out which one you live in. It has already been alluded to, but there are several localities that are not served by a soil and water conservation district. In the lower James Basin, that's we get a lot of calls from folks in the city of Hampton, Newport News, city of Norfolk, and the city of Portsmouth. Unfortunately, those localities are not within a district and therefore are ineligible, at least right now, to access VCAP funding. So certainly if you live in those localities, it sounds like the JRA program would be your best bet. Thinking about, Casey, your question earlier about potentially stacking programs, VCAP can be stacked with other programs. So it might just be a bit of a timeline issue, given that VCAP does have some application requirements that are based on a statewide program. But as long as you're not receiving more than 100% of your costs via reimbursement, then you could still apply for VCAP along with another program. We just can't pay you to put in a living shoreline. So VCAP is statewide, administered locally by districts. The program as a whole is a technical and financial assistance program for landowners who are looking to install best management practices to manage stormwater on their property. So there is a whole suite of best management practices that are eligible for reimbursement through the program. I'm going to go ahead and also link the program website, so you have that here. And one of those eligible practices is living shorelines. So living shorelines, there are a few specifications that you have to be eligible to apply. The first one is that VCAP is meant to be a retrofitting program. So if you are a landowner and you just bought your property, or you're just now building your house, or if there is a church or a school, a business that is newly constructed, then you would not be eligible to apply. Any structures on the property must be at least 3 years old to be eligible to apply because of that retrofitting requirement. So that is one specification to keep in mind. The other is specifically looking at the shoreline. There is a fetch distance requirement. So if you have a fetch distance greater than 1.5 miles in any direction from your shoreline, then you would not be eligible to apply. Now, there is a caveat in the actual application. If there's a very small portion of your shoreline that exceeds that limit, then you can still apply for consideration, but it's just not good if you are on a larger section of the river, or if you're bayfront, and then it's unlikely that you would be eligible to apply. So those are the two big ones to keep in mind. Other that are, well, big ones to keep in mind that are specific to living shorelines. Other considerations for the program as a whole, no matter what BMP you apply for. We do also have a 10-year maintenance requirement. So you would be signing a contract saying that you agree to maintain the living shoreline for at least 10 years. The reimbursement that you receive for living shorelines is considered, well, for any BMP through the program, is considered taxable income by the IRS. So after you receive your reimbursement, you will receive a 1099 form in the following tax year. So we've had some issues with that, where folks came back to us after they installed their project and said, you know, I didn't know that this was going to be a thing, and it's bumped me into a different tax bracket. So that's something that's really important to keep in mind when you're thinking about the program. Another final consideration is that there is a timing requirement for your application. You must receive approval from the VCAP steering committee before you begin any work on the project. So if you get started in construction and then decide to apply for the program, unfortunately, you wouldn't be eligible to receive that reimbursement. So just some things to keep in mind about thinking about an application. The big question is obviously the reimbursement amount. For living shorelines, the reimbursement is 75% of your total costs up to $15,000. There is that $15,000 cap. Otherwise, 75% of your total costs. So like I said earlier, the program won't pay for 100% of your costs. You might be able to reach that 100% limit if you applied for another source of funding, but we would never exceed that 100% reimbursement. So I think that was the main points that I wanted to cover. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them now.
Robyn, there is a question in the chat from Andrew about, is VCAP, can it be used on county-owned properties for a living shoreline?
That's a good question. VCAP funds, technically, local governments, government bodies are the only landowners that are ineligible to apply. So schools can apply, churches can apply, homeowners associations can apply as an entity. Obviously, individual residents can apply, but governments are not eligible.
So Robyn, in that question right there, so if there's an area that we're dealing with that is kind of like, you know, my great grandparents donated it to the federal government, and the county is managing it right now. So if they conveyed that property back to us, what you were working on, we can still apply ourselves.
Sure, if it was a nonprofit can apply, individuals can apply. It sounds like you would be eligible.
Okay, I just wanted to know, like, as far when you talk about ownership, is it, you know, because we would be the managers, we would be the ones that be responsible for that 10-year oversight and management of it. So,
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I was looking at the VCAP data that the association shared with me recently, and since VCAP started, from a living shoreline perspective, I think they've funded about 34 different VCAP living shoreline projects, and they've all really been focused in 4 soil and water conservation districts: Northern Neck, Tidewater, which is the Gloucester, Matthews area, Eastern Shore, and Colonial. SWCD has the other big group of them.
Yeah, a bit surprisingly, we've done 7 shorelines through the program, and all of them have been in the York River watershed. So we're hoping to get some more folks from the James interested and signed up soon. That also reminds me that Ryan alluded to some funding questions about the program. VCAP, as of 2 fiscal years ago, has been funded by the state legislature's budget. We're hopeful that continues, but it has happened several times that funding has run out because of increased demand from folks across the state. So as up to this most recent January meeting, funding for the program had run out. So that does happen occasionally, but thankfully the program administrators at the state level are always seeking grant funds and supplemental funds to contribute to what the state offers. So as of right now, we're back in full program operation. Funding has been received, and we hope we'll be receiving even more when the state begins their new fiscal year in July.
Just so everybody knows those numbers, I saw an update on monies associated with VCAP and other ag programs the other day, and it said that there's ongoing budget discussions still, of course, but the House was suggesting an additional 500,000 in FY22, which would bring the VCAP allocation up to $1 million. The Senate at that time did not increase it. They kept it at 500,000. So the House and Senate will have to come to some medium number there for FY22.
Right.
So Ryan and Robyn too, in the so applying for these grants, because this is, I mean, I'm used to applying for area grants for other stuff like Health and Human Services or communities empowering youth. So this is a new area. So is this something that you all, when you talk about technical assistance, that you assist with us applying for this grant?
Yeah, I'll jump in first. So it depends on which district you're in or which district your project is in, but I know most district staff who offer the VCAP program have a dedicated staff member to assist with applicants' questions and preparing an application. So you will have a staff member involved and who can help you put that application together.
Okay. All right. Yeah, this is Isle of Wight, so I know it's out of your area. I'm across the Surrey side of the James.
Sure.
So, okay, but Ryan, that's something that you all, I know you said you reached out before, and I do remember your name.
Right.
I'm just trying to, I put on a lot of meetings over the last year.
I should have linked this earlier. I'm linking right now. So we have a website that has information about this program as well as how to apply for it. We're just about finished conducting site visits for the first round, and so we're hoping to restart those site visits probably in the spring or summer.
Okay, and so as we're doing this, if we do a collaborative agreement with this and write the grant, who's the lead on that grant and who does the funding come to? Is it just your organization, or is it, that's one thing I really want to understand, because, a lot of times that the funding goes to these agencies and, the equity still doesn't help the localities that's supposed to be the agencies is doing it.
So if you applied for our cost share program, that would just go straight to us. And specifically, if you apply,
I'm sorry, you cut out. Do it again. If we applied for your cost sharing and then it went out.
If you apply for our cost share program, it would just go straight to us, and specifically, I would get the email about it.
Okay, it would come straight to you. That's what I'm hearing. I didn't hear all of it.
The money came from the Virginia Environmental Endowment, but you would apply straight directly through us.
Okay, but we can assign our own. I mean, and this is, and like I said, I've been involved with grant proposals and things before, and so we are able to make sure that our legal team and our CPAs and everything is involved totally with this, so there's complete accountability.
Yeah, if hypothetically someone does apply for our program and gets approved, we would generate a concept design for a living shoreline, and then we would then generate a cost estimate. We have a list of marine contractors that we vetted, whose work we reviewed, and they filled out a request for proposals for us. An RFQ for us. And so then it's someone who would install these projects and would finish them in, who we deem trustworthy. You wouldn't necessarily be beholden to them. If you wanted to use your own contractor, you could certainly do that. But we would enter a three-way landowner agreement with them where we would pay for half the project and then the homeowner / entity would pay for half the project.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So that if we have a qualified tribally owned company that could be a part, they could go through the vetting process to be approved.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. All right, thank you.
I guess I'll jump in and go ahead. Last week, Ryan, Robyn, and I agreed that we wouldn't do slides. Over the weekend, though, I changed my mind. So I do have a couple because I've got a few more programs to talk about. So let me see here. Share my screen. Share. Is that coming through? All right, so first, talk about Cs. I mentioned this slide earlier. We provide technical assistance to property owners, localities for their own property, as well as state and federal agencies who manage property, who are experiencing tidal, shoreline, or even non-tidal stream bank erosion. We do go statewide. The bulk of our technical assistance work with property owners is in tidal Virginia, and historically it has always been that bulk in tidal Virginia. But we go, we've been to Southwest, we go to Harrisonburg, Upper James area, so we get around sometimes with the non-tidal stream bank as well. We've been a resource for over 40 years to the Commonwealth citizens and property owners. Someone in the General Assembly thought it was good to have a non-biased technical assistance that can help property owners out. So what do? We do site investigations. We will go out to a property and look at what's causing the erosion, help the property owner understand what's going on with their property, and then we'll guide them through a discussion about possible solutions and things that they can do on their property to halt that erosion or at least limit it and mitigate it. We follow that up with a written advisory report with written recommendations and a whole host of attachments, including lists of contractors, and some shoreline solutions homeowners can do it themselves, and so there's attachments that the homeowners can reach out to contractors, to designers, resources to buy different materials if it's a small enough project they can do themselves, and so they can use that advisory report to help them through that process. In this effort with Ryan at JRA, we're sharing these advisory reports with them on the site visits we go with him for people interested in their cost share program. And the same thing with VCAP across the tidal Virginia, all the sites that we go to where there's a VCAP, at least conceptually eligible project, we share that report with, we can share that report with the Soil and Water Conservation District. After we sum things up with a written advisory report, let's see here, wrong direction. Well, there we go. And a property owner decides to do something about their erosion problem and implement some solution. We can't do a design for them, but we can look at a design and comment on them. And so even a good design, having a third set of eyes, fourth set of eyes on it can maybe see something that'll make it a great design. We can work with the homeowner if they do the design themselves. We can work with Ryan if they're getting a cost share from a program like JRA or VCAP. And if you're working with your own contractor, we can look at their designs and comment on their plans to make it a better shoreline solution. After that, we can also come out to the property after a property owner's got their permit and decide to spend some money on construction. We can do construction inspections because we found that a lot of homeowners, don't know too much about the shoreline, much less too much about the construction and contractors doing the work. And so this construction inspection is just between us and the landowner. We're not one of the regulators. We're not one of the state entities that issue the permit. And so we're just trying to give the homeowner an opportunity to better understand what the contractor is doing on their property compared to what the design and the permit says that should be going on there. We can also talk, sometimes we'll go to homeowners associations. We have one homeowner that reaches out to us and we'll go there. They learn about our program and they want us to share it with their entire homeowners association. So we've gone to those types of meetings and talked about it. And then we don't have financial incentives ourselves at SEAS, but we can connect you to and direct you to financial incentives like VCAP, like JRA's program that we think would be a good fit for you. The good thing is all of our services as a state employee, as a state program, not free really because you paid your taxes, but we're not going to charge you for it. So it's a free technical assistance to you on your property to help you get started in finding a solution for your erosion problem. So let's talk about some other financial incentives for living shorelines out there. When I mentioned that you need a permit for these, you might not think that's a financial incentive, but if you decide to do a living shoreline and if it meets some conditions and you get one of these general permits, if your project is eligible for that, there may be no fee. In fact, if it's one of these really small type projects, Robyn mentioned the fetch limitation for VCAP funding. And you can see that applies right here to this group 2 general permit. And so if it's one of these smaller projects with a smaller fetch of half a mile, you might have no fee for your permit. And so there's your financial incentive for choosing a living shoreline as opposed to some other solution. So low interest loans. There are low interest loans available for living shorelines. These aren't available for other solutions. They're not available for bulkheads and seawalls and revetments. It's through our sister state agency, Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. They made some changes due to General Assembly passing some bills. I guess that's nearly 5 or 6 years ago. Pretty much the state will loan a locality some money to implement a living shoreline. And it really kind of is 2 categories. The locality can take a loan out to do a living shoreline on their property. And so I think Westmoreland County has recently applied for one, and down here in the James City County has one for the Chickahominy Riverfront Park. And so the locality can use the loan to do a living shoreline on their own property and pay it back with their budget mechanisms. Alternatively, a locality can take out a loan and pass through that loan to individual property owners. And the example here is actually not in the James. The only entity that we know that is doing this is the Middle Peninsula Planning District Commission. And so, they cover 4, 5, or 6 counties there in the Middle Peninsula. Part of their watershed would be in the York, part of it would be in the Rappahannock. And they've actually taken 2 loans out from DEQ, each about $250,000. So that's $500,000 that the PDC has taken out that has then passed that money down to individual property owners. And the property owners repay the loan to the PDC, and the PDC is responsible for repaying the loan back to the state. And so it's the interest in both situations is at the prime rate usually, or lower than market. In the Middle Peninsula PDC, they set their program up that the maximum amount that a property owner can take out for their living shoreline is really based on their income and their ability to repay. It's a 10-year repayment. And it's been very popular in the Middle Peninsula. They've loaned out, I think, most of that $500,000 to individual property owners. And so we really like to bring this example up in places like the James, where there's not this program, that if there's enough landowners that would be interested in this type of program, it's really going to take them talking to their locality staff, as well as their locality elected leadership, be it county supervisors or city mayors and councilmen about if that locality could take on one of these loans and pass it to individual property owners. Alternatively, the question that Andrew asked, this would be an opportunity for York County to take out a loan to do a living shoreline on county-owned property, and instead of having all that money up front, they'd be able to repay it over that time frame. And so DEQ, of course, has an application process for that and a mechanism. And if anyone's interested specifically, we can get contact information for that program. So agriculture, farmers and ranchers, none of you are familiar with this. There is an agricultural best management practice cost share program that agricultural producers can get cost share assistance to implement a variety of BMPs. This money has helped to fence out livestock from streams to protect water quality. This money is used to help pay for nutrient management and cover crops on agricultural property. But recently, shoreline stabilization was added as an eligible practice for cost share. And so I think this is the second fiscal year, I think, that it's been eligible. And a producer could get as much as $100,000 in reimbursable cost share to implement shoreline management, including living shorelines. It is a cost share program, 75-25, similar to VCAP. It's a 15-year BMP life, so the landowner would have to agree to maintain that for 15 years as a effective shoreline erosion practice. The VAX program, the cost share program, that's its acronym, is a competitive process. Each local soil and water conservation district manages this program locally. They get an allocation of cost share from the state, and then they have a ranking and scoring mechanism where applications are taken and ranked out. And so if there's a project that there's a variety of factors, but for example, if a project has better environmental outcomes or pollutant reductions, it may rank higher than a particular living shoreline on agricultural property, but maybe not. I will say that this being the second year, we didn't have any applicants statewide for this last year, but this year it does look like the Colonial Soil and Water Conservation District right here in the James is being the leader in getting some applications from ag producers that are interested in this newly available cost share. This is just a chart I use to emphasize that there really is a lot of tidal shoreline in Virginia that is either agriculture or forested. Now, some forested, properties might be public properties or parks, or it might not be, silvicultural, but if it is a timbering lumber operation, it would be eligible for this as well. So there are quite a bit of miles of shoreline that probably isn't armored with revetments or has any shoreline protection, living shoreline at all. So there's great opportunity for this cost share program, I think. Another program that ag producers have access to is a tax credit. And so if they didn't want to take cost share out, or they just wanted to use their money, or even the piece of the funds that are in that cost share program that the producer puts in, they can receive a refundable tax credit if they implement shoreline management according to the standards that the Soil and Water Conservation District and DCR have. And so, it's a little bit more of a incentive there. This number here is written in statute and code about how much the tax credit can be up to. So it's another focused on ag tax credits or ag property owners. The third opportunity for ag property owners is another different low interest loan program, again through our sister agency, Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. I mentioned this when I talked about the WIP earlier. This was recently restarted, and I think it's been very popular at DEQ. And it's not just living shorelines or shoreline management. There's a variety of BMPs that a producer could get a low interest, 0% interest loan to help implement. And again, it's tied back to the standard for shoreline management that's so, excuse me, that the Soil and Water Conservation District and DCR have set up. And so it's got a big dollar figure to help implement that. And, you know, producer could take advantage of a 10-year repayment, 0% interest, and depending on their financial situation, there's an opportunity for principal forgiveness, which essentially turns the loan into a grant from the perspective of the landowner. There's quite a few opportunities there for ag producers to take advantage of some financial incentives for shoreline management. Last one I'll talk about here is written in code a couple of years ago. It's a local property tax exemption. Depending on how you read it, basically a living shoreline would not be not prohibited by a local ordinance. It should qualify for a full exemption from local property tax. So if the locality goes out there and assesses the property, as they do periodically, and they see this beautiful shoreline, living shoreline that you've installed, you stabilized your bank, it looks like you've increased your marsh substantially. You know, they may see that as a great improvement on the property and increase the assessment. The way this code is written, it really should be exempt from that local property tax. We've not personally heard of or seen any specific examples where the locality and the property owner have had to discuss this yet. So I don't really have any examples of how this is or isn't working. There's quite a few financial incentive programs out there. VCAP's on here, JRA's cost share program, as well as Ryan mentioned, Elizabeth River Project cost share. So there really are quite a few financial incentive programs available for living shorelines out there, depending on the land use of the property. I can't see the chat as I'm sharing here. Were there any questions for this?
Heather Mackey is raising her hand. Heather, you can unmute and ask me a question.
So I have a question. I haven't met you, Aaron, but I'm a Bay Act liaison, and I serve the Richmond region and the Richmond Regional Planning District Commission and the Crater Planning District Commission localities. And we get a lot of questions about shoreline erosion control projects, and our requirements say that any proposed, although they're allowed, shoreline erosion control projects are allowed within the resource protection area, they require best available technical assistance. And 9 times out of 10, the proposal is not for living shorelines, but for a riprap or a bulkhead. And what we've come to maybe perhaps cynically expect is that what they're really getting at is taking down their buffer if they have one already so that they can see the water, which creates its own problem. In fact, I was reviewing a project that's 4 years old. It was one that was a shoreline erosion control project where the existing buffer was completely taken down, and a fairly steep slope was denuded and then replaced with grasses, and the riprap was installed. And 4 years later, a good portion of it has failed because, at least in part, they took down the buffer. And so I'm trying to, with this new push for, well, it's not exactly a new push for living shorelines, but the additional push and the additional cost incentives that have come online in the last few years. I know that contractors out there are all saying you have to have a riprap revetment or a bulkhead. They just do, because that's how they get their work, and that it requires the laying back of the bank, and which leads to the denuding. We always tell the localities that they really should be talking with Cs or even VIMs to get a little bit more balanced type of technical assistance. But, you know, frankly, I didn't know about the DEQ funding out there. How are property owners and or localities finding out about that? How are we going to make this shift away from this taking down of the buffer in order to install a shoreline erosion control project? I know in sometimes it's necessary. You know, living shorelines aren't going to work in every scenario. But what can we do to get kind of turn this towards living shorelines?
Looks like they're going to close us out here in a few seconds. There's I hear several questions in there, and the short answer for technical assistance, it's everyone at this collaborative pushing the message to any landowner and locality that we can talk to about getting technical assistance, be it Ryan or me or Robyn out on the property and helping them. The questions regarding the living shorelines, you know, there's a lot still unknown until, as we heard this morning, Randy pushes out the guidelines on March 1st for the new living shorelines. And I think that might provide us at least some more clarity on that, but I understand and hear what you're saying. And we get those same challenging questions sometimes.
I gotcha.
I'm so sorry. You did?
I got it.
Oh, awesome.
Teamwork.
Y'all are the best. Well, yeah, thank you so much.